Hello,
Hello.
hello.
How are you?
I am fabulous. Thank you for joining me. And thanks for everybody who is joining us live. I have with me today Katie McManus, business strategist and money mindset coach. And we figured we'd come on here and discuss a little bit about mindset, mastering our mindset, especially with election anxiety.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So first, before we get started, I want to acknowledge that election day anxiety is a real thing. And actually this week, the AP-NORC Center for Public Affairs came out with a statistic that said 7 out of 10 Americans are frustrated or anxious about the election.
Yeah.
So at least 70% of us are freaking out a little bit at the moment.
Yeah. I think the other 30% is just probably has other stuff going on.
Yeah,
they're
not
also
paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to go through some of the things that I use with my clients, but I also would love to hear, especially with your mindset coaching, like what are the anxieties that you're hearing? How are you dealing with it? And how are you suggesting people deal with kind of the anxiety around this very charged time?
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with you. Like, what are you doing to personally take care of yourself?
So I'm an act over anxiety kind of person. So I've been super active getting out with GOTV, which is Get Out the Vote for Harris, and just, been as involved as I possibly can with everything else that I have on my plate. And I find that honestly helps a great deal, because you feel like you're doing something. You're not just sitting there like just waiting for an answer that you're hoping is going to be good. Right. That's how I deal with it. I also tend to be very gracious with myself when I go through like really stressful times. So if I need to take a nap, I take a nap. If I need to eat some junk, I eat some junk. Like, I don't hold myself to a bunch of standards for how I want to like live my best life when things are ideal, because it's just not realistic when things are this stressful. And I also have like a really solid core group of people that I know I can turn to who aren't going to offload more stress on me. And I think this is really important for coaches in particular, because what we do for our clients is we hold space for them and their anxieties. And we have to have people who can hold that for us as well.
Yes.
Right.
It's similar to, I'd never go to a therapist who doesn't also have a therapist. Right? Because taking in so much of people's stuff and trauma, making space for them, even if you're 100% healthy and have never had any type of trauma in your life, just that secondhand, right? You need some help.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And it's, I know energy workers have to do this too. They have to like clear their energy after doing sessions and after supporting their clients. And even after going out and interacting with the world, like they have to kind of reset themselves back to zero.
Yes.
And we have to do the same, and we're not necessarily in the same kind of energy work sphere. But I feel like when you work with people, you're always working with energy.
Yes. Yeah. It's great that you bring that up. As you know, I also do pranic healing as part of my holistic wellness coaching. And they teach you very much to take care of yourself, whether it's cutting cords, like you have to physically and mentally kind of disconnect in between sessions, or you're going to bring like the energy from one client to another, which is not something that you want to do. And you have to take really good care of your energy. Like, you should never do energetic healing when you're sick yourself, because you could actually make someone sick.
Right.
Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I love how, I love watching you on LinkedIn and other places, like how active you have been during the whole election process. It's actually really fun. I mean, my husband and I were like, early vote, our votes are in, we've done our part. But it's actually, I think in this day and age, like really inspiring to see you out there, because a lot of us kind of just do the behind the scenes, social media, or even just walking around the neighborhood, like seeing the yard signs that are up. There's not that many up. People aren't that open about their politics. And it's fun watching you.
Funny. I feel like we all just go around assuming that everyone acts the way we do. Right. Because I grew up in a very politically active family. I think the first time I went door to door asking for people to vote, I was 4 months old. Like, I have no recollection of it. But it's just been involved in my life. Like, my dad is president of the Cape and Islands Democratic Committee. And he's run for office. He's been an elected official for most of my life. And it's just always been in my stratosphere that like you're active, you have the bumper stickers, you have the signs on your lawn, you go to the fundraisers, you do this, you do this, you do this. And I take for granted that that's not everyone's normal.
Yeah. Well, and on the flip side, this is only the third presidential election I've been able to vote in because I'm originally an immigrant. I became a US citizen in 2017.
I knew this and I didn't connect it. That's wild.
And so growing up, there was no politics. My mother couldn't vote.
Right.
Obviously, I couldn't vote either as a kid, but I don't remember my American family ever talking about politics. Like they were kind of not present to that. I remember as a kid watching like Nickelodeon when George Bush, the original George Bush was going for presidency and I think it was against Dukakis and like, and like the kid vote.
Yeah.
But so I find it's like such a privilege and a right to be able to vote.
Right.
And even for many, many years, I would say to my friends, I can't vote, so vote for me.
Right.
Right. Because it's, again, it is a privilege to be able to go out there and vote. And so now I'm lucky that I live in a state where it's super easy, where you mail in your vote, days ahead of time.
Right.
But I wish more people were more active in it because I hear a lot of people say, oh, I'm just one person, or it's, I've also heard the Electoral College actually does the electing. Yeah, but right.
But it's you this is something that actually kind of frustrates me when I hear someone say, I really want to start a business. And then when it comes to something like this, like, oh, well, I don't have any power. I don't have any power to affect this. It's like, well, good luck starting a business. Like, what do you think starting a business is? It's literally going out and saying, I have power to impact other people in the world. And I want to do it for the good of me and for the good of everyone. What do you think an election is? It's a series of conversations you can go out and have, to share your story and what the candidates would mean to you as an individual. And I think that's so powerful. And I think it's so sad that so many people feel disenfranchised in that way.
Yeah. I think partly it's the political system that we find ourselves in that, it used to be both sides were very reasonable and it was all about policy. And over the last at least 8 years, if not 12 years, it's become very like attacking the other side. And one thing we have to remember is no matter what happens tomorrow, by the end of the week, we're still all Americans and we have to find a way to kind of stay together and be together.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, one of the things I wanted to talk about is taking charge of like what you're watching, like your media consumption throughout this week. And so some of the tips I've shared is just around boundaries, right? Don't doom scroll all day long.
Yeah.
And also pay attention to what news sources you're listening to. I feel like a lot of us are getting our election information on things like TikTok and Instagram, right? Which is still fairly new.
Right.
And I'm actually having a hard time thinking of like real reputable sources these days. The two that come to mind for me are BBC and NPR.
Right. Yeah.
What about you? Where are you getting your information?
I get it from AP, the Associated Press. I don't like, I'll see stuff on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn, and then I will go to try to find a very reputable source to see if it's true or not. And it's funny, I was listening to this book that we were talking about this morning when we were talking about going live, called Thinking in Bets. And what's fascinating, and it explains a lot about what's going on right now, is that the human brain is designed to be trusting of the first bit of information it gets. So if you show people a list of like 10 statements and like 3 of them you say are false, just because they read the statement, they're more likely to think it's true.
Like it's knowledge bias, right? The first thing you learn, you take that in as knowledge, and then you're biased to make that true.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, like it's, and we're all in our own echo chamber. I mean, this is why this is how social media gets us to stay on the platform, right? They show us stuff that they know that we'll like, or that will get us fired up and really active. And I mean, to the point of, being very, very conscious of what kind of information you're giving yourself right now. I know I'm on the handle a lot saying, you got to be on LinkedIn, you got to post, you got to be commenting on people's stuff. Not in the next 2 days. Everyone gets time out from that. Like, you don't have to do it if it's getting to you and if it's really messing with your anxiety.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think I do enjoy seeing some of the political stuff on both sides, because I think At the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want to be able to have a good life, to be able to afford groceries. We want to take care of our families. And it's really interesting how, the different politics play at those things.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I can't wait for the election to be over for a number of reasons, including somehow I've gotten on the political polls in Washington. And so I get text messages, I kid you not, 10, 20 a day from both sides, because I've never been like a true blue or a true red voter. I've been very in the middle.
Right.
And so I'm getting these texts, and my husband's like, "Oh, funny, I don't get any." And I was like, "Oh, I should share your number."
God, that would be so
But
mean.
like, the thing that frustrates me is both sides are doing this of like aggressively, defaming the other side.
Mhm.
When at the end of the day, one, we're all Americans, and two, we just need to come together on some certain policies.
Yeah.
And
Well,
don't get me wrong, there's some big policies at play right now.
right. Well, and also the thing that I think a lot of people need to remember is oftentimes like the texts that you're getting are from PACs. They're not from actual candidates and from campaigns. They're from PACs who have a lot of vested interest in a certain person winning. And they'll say whatever they want in a text message, because what's going to happen? Are they going to get slapped with the fine after the election?
Right.
It's not like a TV ad where, the FCC can be like, whoa, that is a lot of misinformation. You got to pull it after they've spent millions of dollars on it. It's, some kid in a think tank who's like, oh, this will piss people off. Like, let's.
That's true. That's very true. And none of the text messages say this message has been approved by, right?
Exactly.
So that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So besides just taking care of where you're getting your information, one of the other tips that I share is like being present in the moment.
Yeah.
And like, no matter what is happening everywhere outside, is like, where am I right now? My feet are on the ground. My butt is in the seat, taking a deep breath and being present. Do you have any tips that you use for kind of like calming yourself in the moment?
Well, what is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 like?
Oh yeah, these are I call it the rule of 5. So it's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste, right? It brings your circle in very close.
I'm really happy it's not 5 things you can taste, because imagine the amount of licking you'd have to do in your space. Okay. No. No, but I mean, so I love that one, although I mix it up and I make it different every time. I also love when I'm outside and I'm doing a mental health walk and I'm just so in my head and I can't get myself out of it. There are 2 practices. I'll like find a color and I'll try to find as many different shades of that one color as possible. Right. And so it really like makes you realize like how much color is vividly around you. Or I'll look for like living, moving things, so from like ants to birds to squirrels to chipmunks, whatever is alive and moving in my space. I'll try to like find 7 of them.
Oh, 7. Okay.
Yeah.
I've definitely been very mindful of finding live things. Like, it just popped into my head. We have this little tiny slug on our back door. And my daughter was trying to like rescue it, but it wouldn't come off. And so we're just kind of watching it, right? Like, where's it going to go? What's going on back there?
Right. Yeah. That can be one of the 5. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just kind of like paying attention to your natural surroundings, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I also think like when in doubt, have a glass of water. Your brain cannot function well and it can't like sort through stressful thoughts if it's not like well lubricated. And I think most of us at all times are running in dehydration land.
Agree.
Yeah.
I think the amount of coffee and tea I drink isn't helping, but
I mean, it helps a little bit, but it's, but I think the caffeine does amp you up a little bit more.
Yeah. That actually brings us to one of the 4th points that I was going to make, was about physical and mental well-being. You already mentioned hydration. A big one for me is movement, right? When you're like stuck in a mental loop. Actually, you had your group do this earlier this week, where you had somebody do jumping jacks to find some motivation. So just getting physical, right? Getting that stress out.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's well, and here's the thing that I heard from, I think, my doctor about adrenaline, and I've never forgotten it. It's that adrenaline doesn't get washed through your system, right? Like, so you can't like hydrate your way out of having adrenaline in your system. You can't. sleep your way out of it. Like adrenaline will enter your system and then just be there until it burns off.
Yeah.
So you have to move. You can dance, you can jump around, you can do like push-ups or crunches or whatever, but you have to move your body. And that's really what gets the adrenaline out of your system. And if you don't, then you just have adrenaline in your system and your body thinks that you're in fight or flight, which is super fun.
Which totally makes sense, right? When you think about it evolutionarily, adrenaline is there so that you can run away from the tiger. It would not be good if you then laid down and took a nap, right? The tiger would get you.
Exactly.
So like actually having to move through it.
Yeah. Or just being on high alert. Like if you're just sitting there like, oh, I'm going to like make a little flower crown because I'm here in the wilderness. And you weren't on high alert for all the different sounds in the world after seeing a threat, like you'd probably get eaten.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why it's so harmful to get so stressed this time. Like the mental stress of it, your body can't tell the difference, right? Between a real tiger and some imaginary thing that you think will happen on Wednesday or Thursday. So just reminding yourself like, I'm safe. My house is still here. My body is still here. My family's okay. For right now, we're safe.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's, I did this in a practice with some clients last week. It's like, especially when you're in like the business building kind of manifestation world, we're told, well, just trust the universe. And it's like, well, maybe if we can't trust the universe right now, maybe if you're feeling like the universe is not necessarily on your side on the political front, like asking yourself to just trust the universe isn't going to be like a reasonable ask right now. So maybe just trust your chair. Maybe just trust the floor you're standing on and then like bring it out as far as you can to like the area that you can trust. And then just be good with that,
I love this topic. And I'm glad you brought it up because sometimes people use I just trust the universe to keep themselves in action, right? Like everything's just going to be delivered to me. And I don't think that's how the universe works.
No, that's not how manifestation works. That's not how any of it works. Yeah.
You mean I can't just write it down in my wish journal and it will just happen? I don't have to do anything?
I mean, I wish. That would be so easy. I would have so much stuff right now. Like I have if I would have this whole house that I've designed and like the garden already, we'd be set up. We wouldn't need to do anything.
Well, yeah, at some point you actually have to hire a developer and someone who's going to build the house, right?
You have to make the money to be able to do it too.
Yeah, that would help.
Yeah.
Awesome. One more thing I wanted to talk about while I have you is, what are some good ways to reframe your thoughts when you're having negative thoughts or, are there any tricks or mantras or things that, you teach people when they're thinking negatively? And I think this would tie in well with the money mindset piece, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have some fear and frustration around money right now, like what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what's a good mindset to have there?
Yeah. I mean, a few things, and it varies from person to person, right? Because we all have our own money mindset garbage and things that trigger us and whatever. So the advice I give one client is very different from the advice I give someone else. For one, whenever we have fear, it links to something that we deeply want for ourselves or our loved ones, right? And so like when we're afraid of something, so like I think a lot of women right now in particular are worried about like freedoms being taken away and autonomy. And it's like, oh my God. So like you so deeply love yourself and the women in your world that you want to make sure that we're all like safe and have freedom to choose, our own futures. Like that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And focusing in on that deep commitment to making sure that you can preserve that for yourself and for others. It's instead of focusing on the bad, focus in on the positive, the thing that like if you could snap your fingers and have be true for everyone that you would want. And just think of like one thing that you could do each day to make that happen, because I think also like if you're trying to talk yourself out of being afraid of something and you don't give yourself like even just a small thing that you can do, your mind's like, okay, like why should we believe that this good thing can happen?
Yeah.
Right. I also think it's really helpful to acknowledge that like the fears and stresses and worries that you're having right now, they're not a part of you. Right. So like an activity I have my clients do from time to time is do like a spring clean, where you basically like either say it in a voice note to yourself, or you write a whole list of like the fears, anxieties, and worries that you're having. But you have to be very intentional. You don't say I'm afraid or I'm worried, because that makes it a part of your identity. I am, right?
Yeah.
And so instead, you kind of like rework the wording to I have anxiety, or I have fear, or I have worry.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like, it's something that you have, it's in your possession, but just because something's in your possession doesn't mean it has to stay with you.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. Years ago, a fitness coach actually said to me, don't ever say, I lost 20 pounds. You didn't lose it. By saying you lost it means you're going to re-find it someday.
Oh, that's a good one. I never thought
Right? Because it puts this negative connotation, and usually
Ah.
lost things are found one way or another. And so she said, I released 20 pounds or something along those, because that's a much more powerful way of saying, you got rid of that weight. You didn't lose it. You don't want to find it. You've released it. It's gone. It's good.
I love that. I never thought about that. That's why I love these kinds of conversations, because you don't realize how many like verbal traps you put yourself into.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was listening to Wayne Dyer. I don't know if you remember Wayne Dyer, but he was like my spiritual guru. He was kind of he was called the grandfather of self-development. He unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, but I got to meet him live and in person back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember something that he said that really stuck with me, that then later came true, is he said, words have power. Be careful what you say. They're almost like little incantations or, magic spells.
Yeah.
And one thing, this, like I've been married twice. In my first marriage, we would often joke about getting divorced, right? Like early on, even like first year of marriage. And we were joking, we were kind of picking on each other because we had like a fun type of relationship where I'd be like, hey, I'm coming home from work, make sure your girlfriend's gone, and things like that. And then, we would joke about things that would trigger each other in a super weird, fun way of like, oh, you put mayonnaise on your French fries, that's cause for divorce. But over time, it's amazing. We ended up getting divorced. And so I'm very, very mindful with my husband now. We don't joke about divorce.
Mm-hmm.
We don't joke about infidelity.
Wow.
We don't say any of those things because we don't want to bring them true.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what I was reading. I've been like on a tear of just absorbing information lately, but even little small verbal things where you say, oh, I can't go, or you like, oh, I'm not feeling great, I don't want to go. Like your brain, like the fact that you're telling an untruth, like if you just don't want to go out, to dinner with friends, you're just tired and you want to stay home, like just say that. I won't do it, because your brain actually struggles with the misalignment, and people
make yourself sick. Yeah.
Make yourself sick. And you also like people get depression that way.
Yeah.
It like eats at your soul. It's wild how powerful our words are. Yeah. But I mean, I totally see that.
Yeah. And how empowering is it to say, I need to stay home today, so that's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I'll go out with you guys next time. Or I would love to come, but I need to stay home today. It's not a lie, right? That's true. It's very empowering. You're choosing to do it.
Yeah.
It's much more powerful than saying like, oh, I'm not feeling well.
Yeah.
And then all night you almost, I've done this too. Then all night you almost like pretend to not feel well. You know what I mean?
It's funny. Every time I've ever like pretended or faked like a headache or not feeling well because I didn't want to go and do something, I get sick. I get a headache, or I get like whatever it is I'm saying I have. I just get, my body's like, oh, okay, cool. So we're just going to have a headache now. That's the game. Cool.
Yeah.
So my therapist.
So I guess for everyone who's listening to, back to the topic of the election, be careful what you say around it too, right? Like demonizing people who believe differently than you isn't helpful, or saying that the world is going to end one way or another, it isn't helpful.
Yeah, no, I think the stakes are incredibly high in this election. And I think, on both sides, people believe that the other person is like the Antichrist. Yeah. And of course, I know my opinion on like which one's true. But I mean, yeah, I have so much compassion for everyone right now, even those who are voting and like really heavy supporters of Trump, because I mean, they've been fed a lot of information and They've been told to distrust a lot of things that are happening right now. And unfortunately, it's at the hands of like a very, very crafty mental and emotional abuser.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think it's interesting because when he first joined the political scene, even I was a little bit like, because I'm a rebel through and through. I was a little bit like, I hate current politics. They all tell us the same thing. Nothing ever changes, blah, blah, blah. And so having someone who's unpredictable and kind of a rebel against the norm seems sexy and seems exciting, but he's already gotten a chance at it, right? And he was not sexy or exciting. I remember waking up every morning going, oh God, what did our president tweet today? Right? Like that's not the kind of world I want to live in.
It would be one thing if he like was like, yeah, I'm different. I'm an outsider. I'm going to be coming in. And he studied and he learned how the government works. And he learned about national security and about geography and about the geopolitical, situations all around the world. And he didn't. He didn't even read his briefings as president. They had to like make it basically pictograms because there's a question of his literacy or just his willingness to sit down and read. I mean, that would be a completely different scenario if he were coming in with some kind of business acumen and this willingness to learn the things that he doesn't know and to have a willingness to listen to his advisors.
Yeah.
But I mean, only one of his cabinet members is endorsing him.
Right. These are people that worked with him for 4 years.
Wow. Yeah. Like they're endorsing Harris. Like that is so telling. That is really, really scary.
And then it's also really interesting that Harris, who, of course, she's not perfect. She's a human, right? So no one is perfect. But she has, she was a prosecutor. She has a long career of kind of getting things done. I think people are unfairly saying, well, she's been a vice president for 4 years and look what she's done. Because a vice president doesn't really do anything anyway, right? So like saying that isn't exactly helpful. But it's interesting how like she has to be like above human.
Yeah.
Right. Because she's a woman. It's so interesting. And he barely has to be like a functioning.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the standard of being a woman, but also being a person of color.
True.
I think there's a double whammy there. And it's just the double standard, triple standard is totally unfair. Yeah. But I mean, she's the most qualified person who's ever run for president. She's been in the three
branches of government. Yes.
Yeah. Branches. I was like, what's the word? Branches of government. I don't think, no other president who's run for election has ever been in all three areas.
Yeah.
Which is pretty badass.
That is pretty badass and really interesting. And, coming with that experience and knowing how all of these functions work, I think can only be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today. If there's one thing you want to leave people with, whether it's a shameless plug or just how to take care of themselves or go ahead and start their business already, what would you?
Well, I mean, obviously start a business and if you want help, like you hit me up. But here's what I wanted to share. It's from this book, Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, that I just learned this the other day. So when we lose, it feels twice as bad as winning feels. Right. So like winning will always feel 50% better than losing will feel bad. Right. So that is our choice. Like it's always going to feel terrible when we lose. And I know a lot of people right now are like hedging their bets and they're like not being hopeful. They're not being excited for the potential win of their party. And I think like that's a big mistake. As Brené Brown says, there's foreboding joy. Like you don't let yourself enjoy like the experience of something because you're worried that it's going to end or it's going to be taken away from you. I mean, like this is a 2-person race of like one person's going to lose, right? So we can choose to like have foreboding joy and prepare for the lose over the next 36, 48.
We're really punishing ourselves twice.
Yeah. But like, what is that going to accomplish? We're just going to be miserable for the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Like, let's go into this. And I invite, my blue supporters, especially, let's go into this, assuming Kamala's winning and she's going to win and she's going to win by a landslide. And let's live in that reality. Let's act like we're in that reality and we're making that reality happen. And then we get to experience whatever will happen when we get the results of this. Like, and we don't have to suffer before we learn that.
Yeah. One of the things I shared this with you earlier when we talked is I decided a while ago during the election to set a worry date. So this is a strategy that you use where you don't worry about a thing until it's time to worry about it because it's out of your control. And so I decided not to worry about the election until Wednesday. So until, after it's done, because I've cast my vote, my husband's cast his vote. We've done our part in that way. We've talked to people about our vote. Everything else is up to the universe at this point, right? It's going to happen how it happens, and we'll worry about the outcome when it's actually time. But like spending the next 3 days eating Halloween candy and, doom scrolling is not going to be for my best interest.
No. Maybe watch your comfort show. Maybe read a book. Maybe go for a hike with the family. I think that's all really healthy.
Yeah. Or just unplug the TV and the social media until Friday.
Well, and when I say like a comfort show, I mean like on a streaming platform that doesn't.
Gilmore Girls. We've been watching lots of Gilmore Girls.
Oh my God. I love Gilmore Girls. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Katie. Thanks for the time today. I hope everyone is, taking care of themselves. And as I always like to remind everyone, don't forget, self-care isn't selfish, it's required. So take care of yourselves. You'll make it through this week. We all will.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.